Hello, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you might be. This is Rachel B. Lee on Friday, and I'm super excited today to have my friend and guest, Albert Thompson. We have been friends for many years after my agency days at Walton Isaacson with the one and only Aaron Walton, and he continues to lead the digital strategy at WI, but really not just that. I mean, you work with some of the best brands out there. You do speaking, moderate panels for Digiday, Adweek, from multicultural to technology to general market. I mean, you really cover so much, Albert. When I think about you, I think he just knows what's going on. You know what I think? He kind of knows what's going on. And that's why I wanted you here because, well, one, I also just want to note that he has a telescope and Bad Boys in the background.
They're all props.
So you know that there's the right kind of dynamic in his personality, right? You talk about personal brands.
Absolutely. Well, look,
So Albert, yes, I'm so pumped. Albert, quickly say what you're up to right now. 20 plus years of experience. What are you focused on right now and what are you excited about?
I think a lot of it is some of the conventions in the overall discipline marketing are outdated. I had a saying that I put on my whiteboard like over a decade ago, and that was to actively try to retire all outdated marketing paradigms. Obviously, went through business school, went through grad school, so I know it was in the books. But once you get into the marketplace and start understanding the face of consumerism, you understand what really just won't track anymore. So, a lot of times I kind of try to speak the truth about, look, this is where it stands. This is kind of the state of the business. This is how to move forward. And here are the things that you need to actively sunset, sort of in need of repair, no longer applicable. You'll hear me use context of in the modern era, this is what it really looks like. So a lot of my narrative has really been around that. And, I use the term sort of marketing technologist. So I've been in digital 22 years, but I'm a more of a marketer's marketer, if you were to honestly ask. So it's really about how technology has really changed the face of marketing as a discipline. Obviously, heavily entrenched in the advertising world, as I've been with WI for a decade and change. So a lot of it is looking at, well, how is this reshaping the narrative of what we should be doing? How should we be taking brands to market? So that's a bit of a preamble, but I mean, so in a nutshell, up to a lot. But a lot of times it's just laying out, look, here is where we are. And here's how you probably need to rethink what you've been doing from a business strategy standpoint.
So let's talk more about that.
Okay.
The topic today is consumer mentality in the B2B2C world. With technology, right, and this change, I mean, you're right. Like, there's so many things that need to go and so many things that need to continue. So can you talk a little bit about with technology and where we're at? What is the mentality with consumers, and then what is going on?
Absolutely. So let's first lean into this B2B2C, and I can't take credit for it, but when I heard it, it made total sense. A lot of marketers, even agencies, media partners are spending so much time protecting and being enamored what's in the middle. Here's what I mean by what's in the middle. You got a consumer on one end who's going to buy something. You got a brand who's manufacturing something on the other end. The whole premise of marketing is to create an exchange in some sort of marketplace. But when you hear people get enamored over, the things like the upfronts or this particular content play, and it's like, yeah, but that's not how the consumer thinks. The consumer doesn't say, I'm going to turn on the television to figure out what I'm going to buy today. I mean, they call that QVC and Home Shopping Network. Okay, but those are two channels from your cable provider, or if you pull the plug, that's two apps. So when you start to get into it, there's so much focus on what's in the middle, the B2B. That let's say I'm an agency buying media with this partner. That's great. What about the consumer? Or I'm a brand and I'm focused on my channel partnerships, my retail partnerships with big box retailers, could be drugstores, grocery stores, what have you. That's great. But is that where the consumer wants to see you, where they want to meet you? Is that the behavior? So the notion is you're actually in the B2B2C business in the sense that, yes, you may be buying media across your favorite platforms, but a consumer has to engage with that product and actually buy something. Otherwise, what's the point of the spend? I mean, look, the average brand is not in the business of making TV shows. So do they really care about your upcoming slate? Yeah, if they watch it personally, but from a marketing standpoint, it actually has to mean something to the consumer. And it's the same thing. Well, I watch brands launch and expand into a physical retail footprint. I'm like, wow, you really just extended into, thousands of marketplaces. That's amazing. Is the consumer even there? Do they even know you exist? Like, why would you do that? You need to establish an understanding of buyer preferences, behavior, path to purchase, decision-making model before you start getting enamored with the B2B portion of the value chain, and understand where you're going to meet the C, where you're going to meet the consumer. And I think that just gets left because there's so much protecting of what's in the middle from entities that are in the middle, because that's their business. I get it. That's your day job. That's what you focus on. But at the end of the day, as I always say, only the consumer gets to win, and they'll fire you the second they buy your competitive product. So you better dial into where they are and what they care about. And the thing that's very interesting is if you look at a lot of these legacy companies that have been around 40, 50, 70, 100 years, when they started, they understood the voice of the consumer. They built a business around it. What I see very absent in marketing right now is a reflection of the voice in the consumer in the actual marketing strategy. I can look at a plan, look at a go-to-market approach, look at a media buy plan, and I'm like, yeah, but where's the consumer in that? Like, I don't see anything representative of how they are in what you are producing to go to market. And it's because you're so consumed with being in the middle and everyone who's in the middle with you. And again, I go back to the analogy: consumer on one hand, I want to buy something, a brand manufactures something at a plant somewhere, and it's like the two have to meet. And yes, the value, the value chain is what transpires in the middle. But at the end of the day, marketers need to get more focused on the end game, the consumer. I think the main movement through COVID was everybody's like, oh my God, we have to have a D2C strategy because no one's going to physical retail or foot traffic is low. Well, you should have had one anyway. You should have had one because the only way you can understand the voice of the consumer relative to what you are selling is if you have that direct relationship. It's very hard to extract that because you have a partnership with CVS, or you have a partnership with Walmart.com, or you have a partnership with the Amazon marketplace. And I'm not saying those are bad strategies. I think they've been very profitable for many companies. So kudos to what those entities have built. But when you start to get into how people relate to your product, the feedback loop, the user experience, the ownership experience, the trial experience, a lot of that needs to come through a direct mechanism. I mean, they need to call you out and tell you how to fix it, how to retool. What's amazing about it, these marketplaces aren't designed to aggregate that at massive scale for the average manufacturer. That's not why they built themselves. So they shouldn't even be tasked with trying to own that necessarily. Kudos if they are. But a brand needs their own lens as to what is happening with what they make, because they don't know if they need to innovate, retool, recall, what have you, to move forth in the next iteration of what they're going to make. And I applaud a lot of the scrappy beauty brands that didn't have the money for distribution in Whole Foods and had to build with a D2C model, but really refine what they are making, what they are selling, what their value proposition is going to be, what their unique story, and then moved into marketplaces to really create scale. So I think people
sort of like the reverse. I mean, we have COVID, but even outside of COVID, that's really forced digitization.
yes.
That now what you're saying is, oh, okay, so the business, we know this, the companies are not focused enough on the people, us. They're more focused on the channel and actually what's happening inside the company versus out.
Yes.
And that the most innovative companies are, whether it's beauty brands or, the SaaS products, whatever, are saying, I don't need to go through a channel, whatever. I'm going to go straight to the customer. You know why? Because I have the technology, right? And we were talking about the marketing technology to go straight to the customer. And guess what? I know them better than you do. I actually listen to what they say. So I want you to talk about that a little bit, Albert, where you're working with a lot of these brands. And hey, Hunt, I see you. What can I both learn from home and practice? Let's hold that one second, Hunt. What do you think that the brands are doing so wrong? Where are they missing in understanding the voice of the consumer? What are they missing?
I think things like programmatic allowed them, the notion of programmatic allowed them to get complacent.
Programmatic ad spend.
Programmatic just as a discipline, the whole
Yeah.
idea that the machines are so smart, I don't need to be smarter. Look, the machines are still man-made. So they're only as good as human intelligence that built them, which means they have bias based on the lack of, based on who programmed and built it. They're not a be all end all. So and I would tell even partners, like, machines are only as good as what I inform it. And me as the leading edge for representing a brand and marketer, it's only going to get really good until I start putting inputs to it. Not you on the platform side, me as the marketer on behalf of the brand who knows the brand far better than your platform will. So when you start to think about that, you start to understand the consumer intelligence needs to reside with the one whose stake is greatest. And that is essentially the manufacturer of the product or service, period. So I think with programmatic, a lot of people do is, we just put it in this engine and it does this thing. And all we have to do is let it democratize and optimize, and boom, we get profit. And then when it doesn't work, people are like, oh, why not? It's like, well, you don't know enough about who you're selling to, and the machine doesn't identify a person by persona and personality and bias and things that they will never declare. It looks at them as a user session or deterministic, probabilistic as an impression head count. I mean, come on now. This isn't consumer speak. This is ad tech speak. So I think that mentality became very pervasive just across the discipline of marketing because it now made it automated and easy. And let's be clear, AI still has bias. That's why they had to go through and scrub everything related to cultural sensitivities, because it was programmed by an individual who was of a culture, not of all cultures. So, I mean, look, if AI has bias, everything has bias. The only way to obliterate bias is you got to get to know your consumer base at scale and at large. And look, the technology has been there. It's been advancing. What I find missing in marketing today is intellectual curiosity. And that was also one of the things, the hallmark, when I said, look, got to retire all these outdated paradigms. Like, you got to have intellectual curiosity. You have to have the willingness to discover what is next and new before you need to be there. And what I find is that either the average marketer doesn't have time, it doesn't know where to starting point, and it's certainly not groomed. There are only a few companies, maybe one per category, where the leadership and the body of it is intellectually curious about what's the next. How do we change this particular paradigm? How do we break what we just built? How do we sunset ourselves to innovate and create a new organizational paradigm? And that's why there's always one company in a category who has 30, 60% margins, and everybody else is in the teens or single digits, because they're the only organization that behaves around that. And most of the time, they are wrapped around technology's evolution to continuously get better and improve. And look, a lot of times it comes down to the philosophy of who actually runs the shop. If the person who's running it, the top marketer or top executive gets it, boom, it's done. If they didn't come from that world, they're not even doing it at all. So there's such a huge gap and disparity in that. And I think part of it is companies got burned with IT in the early 2000s, with all the money they put into it, and they kind of lost their shirts on it. So they got a little bit disenfranchised with the idea of technology investment. And look, you can, if you don't know what you're acquiring or buying, you can always lose your shirt. So I think the notion is that intellectual curiosity allows you to play around with discovery, figuring it out, low level of risk investment. I always tell clients, you should be spending 5-10% on just discovery. Just consider it as a loss leader, but you need to figure out what your future is going to be before the future gets there. And that is something that you just kind of see missing from the ethos of the thinking and thought process.
So let's take a look at what he said, learned of a completely new market during COVID, H to H, home to home. What can I both learn from home and practice from home to earn money? I love your perspective on this, Albert.
Yeah, it's funny. When you think about it, we used to buy in what I would call buying modes or buying events. I was saying, like, I'm going to go shopping this weekend. I'm going to go shopping this evening. We're always shopping. Like, that's the societal shift, that consumerism is always on now, because the workplace has merged with home life. So we're in a mode of work and home, and we're in the mode of shopping and working simultaneously. You think about how many SMS messages we now get plugging us from some flash sale. It used to be flash sales were just for fashion brands or fashion clearinghouses. It's every category is doing it now. Yeah. So when you think about that, the notion of home to home means you have an always on opportunity that in the previous generation did not exist. I think what you have to figure out is what is going to be the mechanism for pulling people in. Like, what do you need to be talking about and how to create the emotional trigger? Because consumers, whatever they buy in a business context or personal, still has to have an emotional trigger. I think that's the biggest thing is you almost have to take on this anthropologist type of mindset from home to home and start to really study people. I think what I find is that human beings walk in a room and the number one thing they do is size people up. They're people watching. People talk about it all the time. Everybody
And
does it.
people watched you from here. I
Right.
said he's got a telescope and Bad Boys.
Right. So you have to do a little people watching if you're in the home to home business, as a methodology. But and here's the thing: it used to be working from home had a stigma. Now it's a norm. So you can have some swag about it that becomes currency for what you do. Whereas before it's like, well, what do you do? Like you can't be really a business professional if you're home all the time. Like you got to be, as they say, out in these streets. So I think that is something that has turned the corner and now gives currency to someone who's has an operation that's based around that. Because now people found that there's such great efficiency in it. You get time back, you get time in. I think the main thing that people were always missing, in particular in marketing, is this notion of think time. We were giving it up for commuting time, which, if you're in LA or, you're not in LA anymore, but you live there, that's 3 hours you give up of your life a day you can't get back, as they say.
Yeah.
So when I would think about, home to home, I would think about starting to understand behaviors around what people do. And look, their platforms.
At home, like back to this, like really understanding your consumer. So I'm sitting at home, my husband's upstairs. Well, I'm in his office right now, right? But I'm like going to the kitchen and I have my dog on the couch and I'm like really thinking about that experience, right? And then if I want to reach Rachel B. Lee in that home experience, how am I going to tap into that on her screen, on her phone, in that walk to the kitchen, right, Albert? Like, I think you're
Yes.
so good at really like thinking about
Well, thing
that
is,
behavior.
with home to home, there are things that are now always on. Like the pantry never closes. Okay. Used to have hours between 6 a.m. and 8 to
I
get it.
close it. I have to because I go get the popcorn. That's my when I'm starting to get too antsy, I just go grab some popcorn.
Right. And then it would open back up at 6 p.m. because at 5 p.m. somebody's cooking dinner. The pantry is always on. So if you're a food company, you now have a consumer for which their pantry is always open. Like that's amazing. I mean, you have to start to re-strategize. There's no peak times. Remember they talk about talk time for radio or drive time, they call it. When people in their cars commuting,
Yeah.
that's kind of active and it's kind of dead. Which means is if you're running, you need to have dual strategy. A terrestrial radio strategy still has drive time, okay? But you need to have a digital audio strategy that's always on. So because a lot of that consumption is now in the home, you start to understand that home to home means there's a digital equivalent that's always on because in the home, that digital platform can now always be on. You don't see all the peaks and valleys in social interaction on Facebook. Like you can tell when lunchtime's coming because everybody's hopping on to start checking notifications. Like now, we used to look at our cell phones in those micro moments that Google pegged, 150 times a day. Well, how many times are we looking at it now in home to home? Because we're not in a meeting where we can't pull the phone out per se. We're on Zoom doing this like we're not looking down at it, So I mean, at the end of the day, micro moments has gone from 150 interactions with the phone to maybe 400 interactions. How are you now going to capitalize on that when you start to look at the opportunity is so vast? So I think when you start to look at the other thing is delivery. We all are waiting. If we didn't get an Amazon package today, we don't feel as good. That we've got it addicted to somebody showing up and dropping something on the steps. Before it was like we were addicted to retail to go to it, which we didn't have time for anyways. Now we just sit and we just kind of wait like this. That becomes an opportunity for a business strategy when you realize that the fulfillment center is on your front step. It's not at the post office. It's not at your office that you pick up one time a day. It's all during the course of the day. So we've almost rewired the consumer mindset to never turn things off and compartmentalize. There's an ebb and flow of moving between all these facets that were really relegated to parts of the day that now can interchangeably operate during all parts of the day. That's a completely different business approach. And that was part of the reason you and I were talking offline about this notion of a digital shelf now.
Well, and I love these fun. I love to say hi to everybody. Hey, John, Swetha, do tell me where you're in from. Cosmo Media, they always. Isabel, what's up, Lady Boss? Mohini, beautiful to see you. Ileana, my girl. Hunt saying sending push notifications to smart fridges, not a bad freaking idea. Raju, hey Raju, how you doing? Alexa in your refrigerator may talk and lure you into purchase and a bite or having a beverage. I mean, it could happen, and you're right, Hunt. Added welcome gifts to new clients to add value and give them that dopamine hit. I several months ago, YouTube did it was like a virtual concert show. It was for I don't even remember. I got it because of the Google partnership and all that. And obviously we're working from home, and they had this all live stream whole thing on YouTube, Albert. And they sent me this box that was so beautiful. It had popcorn to make flavored. It had my tickets. It was physical touch to engage in this completely virtual experience. And you're really making me think about that, where it's like people, it's been, direct mail's dead, like all of that. And it's like,
yeah.
well, now actually you might be sampling all the Unilever days I had of samples.
Yep.
This, like, some of that touch that you're saying, the experience of the package are really a beautiful moments to also get the social posts, right? Like, look at this package I just got from whatever, Lexus, YouTube. So I think it's really interesting when you think about the consumer mentality and how are you going to show up in a different way.
Yes. And I think that is that point of discovery, intellectual curiosity. Look, the digital physical worlds are merging. One is now teaching the other, one is now redefining the other. So the question is, in a world where virtual is now becoming a thing, it's a second swim lane to complement what's in the physical world. How can you still have a physical presence? So you're watching something virtually. YouTube says, yeah, but people are still experiential. They still want to touch it. Let's send people something and drop ship it to them. Now, if YouTube were doing physical, conventions, music conferences, and stuff like that, they probably wouldn't send you anything. They're like, look, you get a T-shirt and you get some food in a concession stand when you arrive, and maybe you get a few of the bennies, and let's call it a day. But the notion is now, because they were forced to really build and operate a direct-to-consumer channel virtually, it's stuck. So as they return to physical, that is still shadowing the physical experience. It's now a complement to it. It's a duality. And look, let's be clear. It's provided another collective reach mechanism that they can package and resell for 20, 50%, maybe double the amount of money, because they're like, hey, we're gonna do it live, or we're gonna do it virtual. So the value has doubled. And look, the virtual reach is greater because physical everything has limitation, has capacity limitations. Only a certain amount of people in an arena, only a certain amount of people in a building. So virtual is now how we get exponentially greater reach, which clients, brands like, they pay for it. So now they've understand, well, there's a monetization model on it. All we got to do is turn on a signal and then we make more money. I mean, look, I've been live streaming since well over a decade. No one was really thinking about it, but the whole notion was the virtual live reach is not the same consumer who shows up in physical form. And that's what they need to think about, is like, people who show up in person aren't always the people who just want to sit behind a monitor. A lot of times it's a totally different audience. So should you be running both? Yes, because the collective mind share is you want as many people as possible, tuning into your product in some form or fashion. So I think the notion of expanding these swim lanes that have physical and virtual running in tandem is something that's going to stay. I think the notion of physical teaching digital and digital teaching physical, it's something that is now going to be more omnipresent, where as a user, you're going to get the experience of both from a brand. And look, that's probably what should have been happening years ago. When I talked about this notion of the digital shelf, it's the portability that commerce can transact at any point that a consumer wants to pull the trigger. You're reading an online review around a product, you should be able to click to buy it. So you see Condé Nast, you see Meredith Publications, Refinery29, all of them putting e-commerce platform shopping carts at the back end of their editorial. So it's content plus commerce. BuzzFeed's doing the same thing. Like, they were reviewing this stuff for years, and they were giving you the rundown of what to buy and how much, but they wouldn't allow you to click to buy. Well, that's just the world we're in. Same thing with social influencer marketing. You're going to see an influencer talk about a product, TikTok maybe buy it, click to buy, boom. So the digital shelf just means that you can, at many inflection points, you can pull someone in down to into the funnel for a purchase opportunity. It's not like you just got to go to this marketplace or just that marketplace. It's like we just need to create a portal to our marketplaces. And I think that is going to reteach the business where it essentially as we can now capture consumer mindshare consideration, the notion of trial at any point, as long as we experiment and figure out what's going to work for our brand, it works really well for the category. I think brands need to spend more time figuring out where is my business being built? Where is the category being built? I hear clients say all the time, well, we want to move off this platform and we like this one. I like that. Where your business is being built over here. So that's probably where you should be because that's where consumerism is being shaped around your product, around your category. I think the notion of B2B forgot that the C will redefine the rules of engagement at will when they want on their terms.
Of the B2B.
Absolutely. And with Liz, they're just so locked into, yeah, but we always sell in here. Our rest of
And it's like, no, you don't. Whatever you thought, just rethink it.
Exactly. Look, the consumer will tell you where they're going to take you. There are instances where innovation is led by the brand product side, but it's still with the idea of what a consumer might want. It often is not done absent that, even if it's done based on points of friction, like we discover this point of friction, we're going to innovate here with this product or this particular channel or sell in this way. It's still done based on human observation. Nothing's in a vacuum. So it's all tied. The question is, once you've then done it, how do you come back around and figure that out? And, I think when you start to look at brands reassessing customer lifetime value, what does that now mean? It can't be coming through your tried and true legacy channels. It has to be looked across the share of wallet of how they are coming in and what stays. Meaning, is someone who comes through social more valuable than someone who comes through a magazine .com's platform for commerce versus someone who comes through Amazon versus Walmart versus to your physical store? Brands need to now figure that out. Is it that the most valuable person is someone who does all those behaviors because we're always on? Like those are major business points of discovery that brands need to start to embark upon. Because I said, the consumer will fire you when they figure out, look, you don't really know how I like to rock over here. I'm going to make some different choices because brand over here sort of gets it. And that's that's the high risk reward of needing to be intellectually curious, is discovering the new frontier before it forms itself and now you're locked out, or you can only fight for the last market share that's left standing.
Yeah. Oh man. I mean, I love all these comments too. They're on fire today. Sahil, all part of the customer relation building. The same is used by companies. They gift employees, say speakers. Absolutely. Hey, Shailesh, good to see you. I'm just in, Jillian, nice to see you as well. Understanding the symbiotic nature of all is necessary. Yeah. And, I know we're going to kind of close out here, but it's a different world for marketers, Albert.
Right.
And you can't be doing the same strategies 10 years ago and think you're going to win today.
No. And I think,
what would be, as we close out, 1, 2, 3 top things that you have to be thinking about today if you are trying to reach your customer?
Yeah, look, I think the first thing is, let's develop a go-to-market model. We met with I remember a company some years ago, and they had a very interesting play. They said, look, 70% of what we do is tried and true. We always do it. 70% of our marketing spend. They were like 20%. We do a little bit of experimentation, but it's still within the wheelhouse of what we're kind of good at. 10%, literally totally experimental, never done it, and we have no expectations on its return. Brands need to have a model like that. You need to have, look, here's what's going to drive the business and core revenue and profitability. Here are things that we'll experiment a little bit, but we have business being there. And the 10%, we're just going to throw it to see if it meant something, if there's meaning in it. And that's the first thing. What you find is everyone's just locked into like a 100% model. We're only going to spend 100% of our dollars on the thing we know it's going to be 100% work. And that just doesn't work. I think the other thing is the voice of the consumer. You're going to have to find different ways of bringing it into the mix of what you do so that it's very core to power a lot of the thinking. I don't care if it's a value chain, supply chain strategy, if it's a point of sale, what marketplaces you should be in. Everything needs to be not based on group theory, because what you see is one brand follows another. Well, we have to be there because everybody else is there. Not really. There are people who are making money and making high profit not being there. So I think I see people follow the B2B approach and not following the C in that. I think, the other thing is when you start to look at the notion of the creator class. So obviously TikTok is probably the most notable for creators. The creators have ability to build mindshare as a consumer face. I think brands have heavily underinvested in the creator class who can take your product, take your service, take your brand identity,
1000%.
and embolden in a way you as a brand can't. Because look, all brands have limitations, all of them. There are places they naturally can't go and don't fit. You have to find mechanisms that give you a gateway into that narrative or into that place or into that consumer psychology that you yourself can't. And I think that is the last mile of what brands are looking at, understanding how far can we not go? What's going to close that last mile for us, as they say in telecom, so we can make that connection. I mean, those would be my sort of key tenets.
Oh, so good. Yeah, I mean, that's the creator economy, that's a big hot topic on Clubhouse, and, LinkedIn is making major waves for creators, and really talk about that. So I think that is such a fantastic point, that is where it's going. Each person is and can be a creator. And that the more you find, you as a personal brand, use your creativity to reach your audience, and then think about that with the brand itself. How can we really enable creators and connect with them? I think it's pretty game changer. Albert, you're the boss.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me on. It was fun. We got to do it again.
You are awesome. Please follow Albert. Catch up with him. He's got a podcast too. And he really he's on the forefront of all of this marketing technology. And I'm so glad that you're on today. I'm so grateful. Thank you for watching today. Hey, Mark, really appreciate all the great comments, and everybody be back next week. And we're over and out. Thank you.
All right. Take care.